carport book review, but today we're technically not under carport. It is built the same as my carport because my dad and I built my carport together. So the structure that I'm underneath today is more like a porch, but it is constructed pretty much identically to how mine is. I'm house sitting for my parents while they're on an anniversary. I almost said honeymoon. They're on an anniversary trip together, and so usually whenever they go somewhere for like a week together, I stay here and I watch all of the dogs, and I bring my dog Biscuit with me. And I knew ahead of time that the timing of me finishing the winter of our Discontent was going to line up perfectly with the first few days that I was staying here. And they have one of those like flat, wide hammocks, and I set it up the other day and it wasn't quite as humid as it is today. I eventually finished through the last couple of chapters of the book and I actually fell asleep out here. But it is so hot and humid out here right now, I don't think I could fall asleep out here if I wanted to. I've been thinking about how I want to cover this book because the last two book reviews that I did, I had the benefit of one book being comprised of short stories, the other book being comprised of a bunch of like chopped up vignettes. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it did make it a little bit easier to talk about the book without necessarily spoiling it, because neither one of those books were as heavily plot driven. So now that I've come to my first review of like a plot driven novel, I was deliberating over the best way to talk about the book without spoiling like important components of the story. I've pretty much just decided that, I'm not gonna like painstakingly go through every detail of the story, so I'm not gonna spoil all of it, but I cannot promise that I will not spoil some components of the story. You've been warned. Once again, I'll show you. There's lots of different covers for Steinbeck books. I don't know what year that this cover is from, but I do really like it a lot. It has Ethan's house, Ethan Hawley. This is the Hawley house. So our main character's name is Ethan Allen Hawley, to be exact. If I had to guess his age, he's married and he has 2 teenage kids. I'm gonna say he's in his mid-40s. And it isn't explicitly said in the book, but I believe that what he's going through is essentially a midlife crisis. He comes from a family lineage of sailors who used to do whaling back in the day, so he explains at some point in the book that a lot of whaling was done to get oil that was then used to light lamps. It's hard for him to fathom that his family was once responsible for procuring the oil that would light the lamps of people all over the nation. His family was respectable. They were well known in their community. He talks fondly of his grandfather and his dad, who had been sailors, and he remembers like his relationship with his grandpa. He just calls him Old Cap'n. He has many times where when he's trying to fall asleep at night or whenever he is torn up about something, that he kind of not literally, well, he kind of does literally speak to his grandfather, maybe out loud literally or just within his mind, that he'll call to the memory of his grandfather for advice, because he has some weird feelings with his relationship to his dad, because at some point his dad kind of accidentally squanders the family fortune because he is given some investment advice that ends up going south. In addition to his family's legacy with being sailors, at some point they were so wealthy that they didn't just own a business in town, they actually owned several buildings on an entire street. And whenever his dad lost the fortune, it cost them not just their lifestyle or their social standing, it kind of took everything from them. And so there's always these reminders throughout the book of kind of the way things used to be. Even from the first few pages, I really liked Ethan because he's a funny guy. He kind of is just always cutting up and cracking jokes, but then it can be a little bit annoying because he'll use jokes to ignore hard questions or confrontation. His wife will kind of pointedly ask him a question and he'll respond with a joke. And that's like the annoying way that personality trait presents itself. But then on the other hand, like, he is genuinely like a likable, funny guy. A lot of people in town really do think highly of Ethan. And I don't think anybody holds it against him that, I mean, it's not his fault that his dad lost the family fortune, but the result of, like, the fallout of all of that happening, there was this little grocery store near his house that his family once owned. And now Ethan works as a clerk, as the only clerk at the grocery store, but he doesn't own it. It's owned by Marullo, and Marullo is an immigrant from Sicily that's been in the States for an unknown period of time. For most of the book, his origin story is pretty much unknown. Ethan has mixed feelings about him, and he holds some bitterness and resentment in his heart that not only does he not own this store anymore, he works in it and he works beneath an immigrant. And he isn't like blatantly racist, but he definitely has some prejudices that he holds on to. And I can see how, from his perspective, it is probably a difficult pill to swallow to know that, like, when in his mind he's like, I should own this place. He definitely feels a sense of entitlement of, like, I shouldn't be working as a clerk here. I should own the place. I should be the one hiring a clerk. And so I was interested at the beginning of, like, how is that going to play out? How much is this resentment and bitterness over what is, you know, how is that going to affect him? How is he going to handle it? But the thing that I like about Ethan is that he really wrestles with how he feels about the way that things are, because the resentment is definitely there, but at the same time, like, he is a good guy, and he is a crucial member of the community. You can tell that other people see something in him that he doesn't even see in himself. People come in regularly. Like, he has people that he sees every single day in his store. And I think back to the years that I spent as a barista through college at this specific little coffee shop on Main Street in my college town. And yeah, there is a very sweet, intimate experience that you get to have in being someone's barista in that way. Like, I've worked there for like three and a half years, and it is heartwarming in hindsight to think of all of the regulars that I got to see and seeing how people's lives evolved. And, you know, people would come in and you would notice, like, this regular and this regular are hanging out now, and, like, maybe this couple met each other here. Like, maybe there's some romantic spark happening between these two customers over here, and you just get a sense of people's patterns. It becomes really apparent that the people in the community look forward to seeing him and getting his help. He doesn't just ring them up. Like, he remembers what they get. He asks about their family. He is legitimately invested in the people in his community. As he wrestles with his own sense of guilt and shame, it's like he thinks so little of himself that he feels embarrassed that he's a grocery store clerk, and he kind of projects this judgment as if he feels like other people are judging him for being, like, a grown man with wife and like a wife and children that is simply just a grocery store clerk. And I think the only reason that he does feel that way is because he's comparing himself to some other potential parallel universe version of himself where he isn't just a clerk, he's the owner of the store. And so he kind of approaches people assuming they see him a certain way, but I don't get the impression that they see him the way that he sees himself. What does kind of confirm his fear in a way is some of the people that he mingles with, like Mr. Baker, which is the banker. I really don't appreciate Mr. Baker because he kind of really needs to just mind his own business. At some point, Ethan's wife, Mary, obtains an inheritance, and it isn't said exactly how much it is. I'm thinking it's less than $10,000, but that amount of money back then went a lot farther than it does now. So it's nothing to turn your nose up at by any means. But Mr. Baker knows this, and he is encouraging Ethan to do something with it. You know, you don't want this money to just sit around. You want to put it to work. And I can understand that sentiment, but it's also like, who are you to just say, hey, I know that your wife inherited this money, what are you going to do with it? Even though Ethan and Mary are a married couple, Ethan sticks to his guns for the majority of the book and saying like, well, that's not my money, that's her money. So who am I to tell Mary what to do with her money? I'm not going to just take all of the money that she inherited and just put it into some speculative investment. And I can respect that because I'm sure he saw how like his own father, you know, he invested a lot of money because, well, I'm pretty sure one of Mr. Baker's relatives, if not his own father, would have been the one responsible for suggesting his dad make the investment that he did. I don't know that it's explicitly stated whether or not he was given investment advice in bad faith, or if he simply just took decent advice and he put all of his eggs in that basket. Because it would be one thing to invest a small portion of your fortune into an investment. Not usually wise to put all of your fortune into one investment, because then flip of the coin, who knows how that'll work out, right? For the most part, it seems like Ethan is mostly okay with where he's at. He's kind of accepted the standing of where his life is at as a consequence of his father's decisions. He's not super caught up in the coulda, woulda, shoulda of it, but the older that his teenagers get, and then hearing his wife talk about it too, his family, his immediate family, is definitely calling into question, like, what are you going to do about it? Are we going to be poor forever? Are you ever going to make something of yourself? Or are you just going to be a grocery store clerk forever? I can see both sides of this because I totally understand that it's like, it's okay to strive for more, but for what reason are you doing it? And I have a quote here: the more you have, the less enough it is. It's a despairing unhappiness I'm afraid of, the panic money brings, the protectiveness and the envy. So yeah, it's like he doesn't really want money for the sake of money. He wants money as a means of securing a lifestyle that he feels somewhat entitled to. He feels this deep urge, especially by the influence of his own family, and then Mr. Baker also mimicking this sentiment of like, you don't want to be a grocery store clerk forever, right? The crux of the story comes down to him being torn about how people go about becoming wealthy. Because on the one hand, he sees where like people do have to work for their money, but from what he has observed, it seems like most of the wealthy people in his town are doing it through means that have questionable moral implications to it. He talks to himself a lot, he thinks a lot, and he thinks to all of like how the town manager has conflicts of interest. There's all kinds of shady business deals happening in the town. And so when he thinks about the people that he could be on the same level as, he asks himself, like, what am I willing to do realistically to get there? Because I don't know that I'm comfortable with doing some of the dishonest things that other people seem to do to acquire it. But yeah, the central question here is what actions can be justified? Because he can see where, like, if you want to, you can justify just about whatever you want. And he can totally identify that, like, there's a quote here, all men are moral, only their neighbors are not. He also thinks about how no one would judge him for making shady decisions because ultimately they would realize that he's a father and a husband. So they would say, well, he's doing it for his family, right? And he also, the people in the town know about his dad's history, about losing the family fortune, so they probably wouldn't judge him for wanting to redeem what his family lineage lost in the grand scheme of things. And so he does find himself very tempted. And the fuel for this flame comes in the form of one of Mary's friends, Margie. She's referred to as a witch. She does tarot card readings. She's been married a couple of times, and she's drawing in alimony money from her previous marriage, and she doesn't work, and she kind of sleeps around with different men in the town, and she's kind of down to have a good time, but then you later find out that she's really kind of prowling for a potential suitor because she realizes that the alimony money that she gets from her previous husband will eventually dry up when he inevitably dies. So she's thinking, like, I'm pretty sure she says at some point that, you know, she wishes him good health not because she cares about him, but because she wants to keep the checks coming in the first of every month. So if her ex-husband is in good health, that basically secures her paycheck every month. But with this in the back of her mind, you know, she'll hang out with people, she'll be super social, she gets to know everybody, she sleeps around with men and kind of gets a taste for the socioeconomic standing of these people, hoping that maybe she'll make one of them her husband. And one time, Margie is over at the Hawley house for dinner, and she whips out the tarot cards. And they don't want their kids to know that they're doing this, so they send their kids down the street, and they're like, hey, here's a few bucks, go watch a movie. And so the adults are alone in the house, and Margie reads the cards. And yeah, like I said, this is the fuel to Ethan's flame of what he's kind of swirling in the back of his mind, because the cards say that he's going to become wealthy, that he's going to become a fortune himself. So then, you know, as he moves forward through the story, he's considering, you know, this urge that I'm feeling. Is this me feeling it? Is this the cards dictating it? Who's to say? Nothing really fantastical happens in the story, but the tarot cards are kind of a superstitious component. And then there's one other component, which is the family talisman. And it's this pink, pale, engraved stone that is basically a family heirloom. He has one rule that he tells his children, which is that the talisman is never to leave the house. So sometimes when he's going through something, he'll go to the box that it's kept in, and he'll open it up, and he'll pick it up, and he'll look at it, and he'll, you know, rub it like a worry stone, and he'll turn it over in his hands, and he'll kind of just meditate on a thought while he's pondering the orb, so to speak. And even his daughter Ellen has a habit of sleepwalking, and often, like if he's awake in the living room late at night, he'll hear something and he'll see his daughter sleepwalk down the stairs, and she'll go to the box and open it, and she'll pick up the talisman and just kind of observe it, and then she'll put it away and she'll go back to bed. And so it becomes this like scattered, reoccurring thing where Ellen, his daughter, will do that in her sleep. What I take the talisman to be symbolic of is family values, legacy, and for him to say to never let it leave the house is interesting. And in the story, I'm pretty sure that the talisman leaves the house 2 times. The first time is whenever, after a lot of deliberation, most of the middle of the story is Ethan deliberating over a hard decision. The people that have gotten ahead in his life seem to have done some lying and stealing and cheating to get there. And he's kind of doing a thought experiment the whole time of like, what evil am I willing to do in order to get ahead? What parts of myself am I willing to sacrifice in order to get there? And a good buddy of his, Joey, works at the bank. And so a lot of mornings, whenever he walks to work, he'll leave his house, he'll pass Joey's house, and a lot of the time, Joey will wait for him, and then they'll walk together, and then they'll part ways. Joey will go open the bank, and Ethan will go open the grocery store. And they chit-chat about anything and everything, and at some point, Joey's just chatting, and he mentions that, you know, if he were going to rob a bank, he would do it on the Friday before a long weekend. And he gives his reasons, but, you know, the head banker probably won't be there. The place might be closing early to customers. You know, everyone in town is going to be making last-minute deposits before the long weekend. So it's like, it's the least amount of staff that will be at the bank, while the most amount of money deposits will also be there in the building. So by Joey's gauge, he thinks, you know, if I were going to stick up a bank, I would do it the Friday before a long weekend. I mean, it's kind of just like a passing conversation that they have. But then slowly, there are breadcrumbs that give the implication that in the back of Ethan's mind, he is considering, would he be capable, would he be willing to rob a bank? I think it's funny that, you know, he considers that as far as stealing goes, he thinks that if you're going to steal, you may as well steal from a bank because the money is insured. So you're not stealing from individual people, you're stealing from this business entity. So he starts to consider a strategy. But as time progresses, these things reveal themselves to him of like, oh, this could be an alibi. This could be a disguise. This could be my opportunity. I'm trying to think. I really don't think, I'm giving away plenty, but I'm not completely spoiling the fun, gritty details of it. But the first time that the talisman leaves their home, he decides to take it with him. It's a Friday before the weekend of the 4th of July. He has the talisman in his pocket for good luck, for strength, for courage. And he's ready. He's rehearsed it. He's taken a stopwatch with him to work. He's curated his alibi. He's got everything set and ready to go. That's not who he is. He does want to be an honest guy and make an honest living, and he wishes that he could get ahead without feeling like there's no choice but to take advantage of someone or to steal or, you know, do something to get ahead. I guess his children, in my opinion, are 2 sides of himself. His daughter Ellen kind of represents doing the right thing, doing the honorable thing. The book calls it keeping the light on. And I guess I took that as like having hope, being able to have hope and do what's right. And that whenever someone's light goes out, it's not that they die, but that a part of their hope, a part of their humanity dies, or they're willing to trade a part of themselves to maybe sell their soul a bit. His daughter kind of represents everything good. And then unfortunately his son, come to find out, is the representation of his temptation to do what is wrong to get ahead. His son's like, "What, Dad? That's the way the cookie crumbles. You can read it in the newspaper. You can see it in our town. Anybody that gets ahead, you do what you got to do." He had no way of knowing what his own dad was dealing with and struggling with internally. Something about finding out that his own son didn't even wrestle with it the way he did. He, without question, saw the way the world works. He accepted what was normal, and he was willing to do whatever it takes. You got to crack some eggs to make an omelet, Dad. And so, yeah, for me, his children are the split of his two minds. I wonder about people who say they haven't had time to think. For myself, I can double think. I find that weighing vegetables, passing the time of day with customers, fighting or loving Mary, coping with the children, none of these prevent a second and continuing layer of thinking, wondering, conjecturing. Surely this must be true of everyone. Maybe not having time to think is not having the wish to think. I'd thought I could put a process in motion and control it at every turn, even stop it when I wanted to. And now the frightening conviction grew in me that such a process may become a thing itself, a person almost, having its own ends and means and quite independent of its creator. And another troublesome thought came in. Did I really start it, or did I simply not resist it? I may have been the mover, but I was not also the moved. Strength and success, they are above morality, above criticism. It seems then that it is not what you do, but how you do it and what you call it. When a condition or a problem becomes too great, humans have the protection of not thinking about it. But it goes inward and minces up with a lot of other things already there, and what comes out is discontent and uneasiness, guilt, and a compulsion to get something, anything, before it's all gone. It does seem to me that nearly everyone I see is nervous and restless and a little loud and gaily crazy, like people getting drunk on New Year's Eve. We can shoot rockets into space, but we can't cure anger or discontent. My Mary opened her eyes. "Ethan," she said, "you're talking in your mind. I don't know what it's about, but it's loud. Stop thinking, Ethan." The talisman comes into play again. It's the only other time that the talisman leaves the house, and this time, instead of Ethan being the one to choose to take the talisman out of the house, his daughter senses that something is wrong, or that her dad's going through something, and when she goes to hug him, he doesn't know it, but she slips the talisman into his pocket, and when he finds it, it changes his mind about a very big decision that he was about to make. So, I've already been talking about this for almost an hour before editing this video. The only other note that I will leave on that has nothing to do with the plot, but I can't not mention it. Okay, let's see. 121. There is this page. This made me cackle laughing in my house. Yeah. So, let me just read this to you. He comes home one night. Mary was asleep, smiling, but when I slipped in beside her, she was half awakened. The misery was in my stomach, the cold, hurting misery. Mary turned on her side and gathered me into her warm, grass-smelling body, and I needed her. I knew the misery would get less, but right now I needed her. I don't know whether she really awakened, but even sleeping, she knew my need. And afterward, she was awake, and she said, "I suppose you're hungry." "Yes, Helen." That's a funny thing. He calls his wife a different name all the time just to be funny. I have not counted all the different names that he calls her, but it kind of makes me chuckle every time. But yeah, she asks if he's hungry. He says, yes, Helen. I said, what do you want? This man says, onion sandwich. No, 2 onion sandwiches on rye bread. And she said, I'll have to have one to stand you. Don't you want one? Of course. She padded down the stairs and came back in a little while with sandwiches and a carton of milk with 2 glasses. I had to look this up. Onion sandwiches are a product of the Great Depression. It's just one of those foods that people ate to keep their bellies full, basically. And then I guess after the fact, some people would still eat stuff like that, even though it clearly wasn't the Great Depression anymore. I was offended at how ridiculous that is. Imagine, you come home, you slide into bed, you have sex with your wife, and then you sit in bed and eat onion sandwiches with glasses of milk together. That is cursed. That is diabolically cursed. I have thought about that every single day since I read it. I cannot imagine. Imagine that is the last thing that I would want to do after having sex, and then to go to bed with that on my stomach. That is insane to me. But that is the note that I will leave you on. Cannery Row was my introduction to Steinbeck. This is just my second Steinbeck book, and I really, 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 really like this book. I found myself identifying with Ethan a lot. I like his character a lot. He's far from perfect. He's kind of annoying. He's got his issues, but he's got some very likable qualities. And he is an overthinker. He is a ruminator, which is what I identify with. But if you have not read this book, I do recommend it. I hadn't really thought about how I would rate it. I give it a hits close to home out of 10. I looked up reviews for this on YouTube. There are not very many of them. I guess this is just a really slept-on Steinbeck book. I don't know why. I don't even remember how I went about picking it. Eventually, I'm going to read Grapes of Wrath, and then eventually, I do want to read East of Eden. I do own a copy of it, but I am admittedly a little intimidated by it being like 600 pages, so I've not got the strength to commit to that quite yet, but I am looking forward to it because everybody hypes up that book, so I hope that it lives up to the hype. But I don't have anything else to say. Good evening.